So everybody, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever we are on the planet. Do you have something to say, Charmaine? Are you going to say something? No?
I think we've all said hello, but I'll say again that I'm so happy to see everyone. Welcome. I see some friends from last time, like Chuck, and we have some new friends here as well.
Yes.
Thanks, Robina, for being here and for continuing to do this series. We're so happy.
Happy. Yeah, I mean, just about an hour, just to get it's like an hour and a few ideas, isn't it? Just a few ideas from Buddha's, what do you call it? Playbook. A few ideas from Buddha's playbook, how to think. That's Buddha's expertise. So we're going to just think we're here for this hour together to think about, listen to, contemplate, internalize, and then apply if we'd like to. That's the point. Literally, Buddha's ideas, Buddha's ideas about the universe, Buddha's ideas about how to be happy, how to stop suffering, Buddha's ideas about how to get wisdom, Buddha's ideas about how to stop being ignorant, Buddha's ideas about how to stop fear, all these things. This is what the Buddha's view is about. Might end up, so we think that's our motivation. I'm not going to sing a prayer. That's our motivation. We set ourselves in the right direction. Yeah. That's why we do something like meditate. So bottom line, isn't it? I always like to remember, it's important to remember repeatedly, the point of all this. Why are we listening to Buddha? Why have we got this statue here? Why the venerable in DC and me wearing these strange 14th century robes? Why actually earlier than 14th century? Why do we think about it? I mean, recently I've been watching a series on Netflix about Scientology, and then I read about other, especially religion. No, not just religion, it's politics as well. I mean, look at the world now, look at America now, the fanaticism, When we start to get completely fanatic, if we get fanatic about ideas, then we're in serious, serious trouble, It's really kind of shocking when you read about cults. And you can so easily see how anything like Buddhism can also be seen that way, because it's different from the rest of the world, it's different from the world you live in. So it's so important when you think about the Buddha's view, the Buddha's approach is that everywhere on the planet, since beginningless time, since humans have started, forget animals, but humans with our clever conceptual ideas, whether you call it Australian Aboriginal ideas, whether you call it, QAnon, whether you call it communism, whether you call it Buddhism, whether you call it whatever it is, it's a bunch of conceptual thoughts that we humans think and therefore live according to, because what you think is how you act. And that actually what Buddha really points out. And we can start to see this as it's really quite a revelation, So if we have the feeling like we've got, if we're materialists, philosophical materialists, which means it's a fairly prevailing view on the planet these days, isn't it? The one that we think is the kind of the rational one, the scientific one. That one says about these things we're talking, that one says that our mind is our brain. And that one says that our mother and father made us. That's the view. It's a viewpoint, It's a viewpoint. It's simply a bunch of concepts, and it's a viewpoint. Whatever goes on in this mind about it is a viewpoint. Well, so is Christianity, so is QAnon, so are Australian Aboriginals, so is Buddhism. They're all a bunch of viewpoints. So the Buddha's point, which I think is so fascinating, the Buddha's point is this, There are viewpoints in our mind that are not in sync with reality. And there are viewpoints in our mind that are in sync with reality. And as far as the Buddha is concerned, when our minds are fully in sync with reality, and of course, that's the question that's being begged, you have to work out, what do you mean by reality? And that's Buddha's expertise. When our mind is even to some degree in sync with reality, that's what brings happiness. That's what causes us to be virtuous. That's what causes us to not harm others. So all of Buddhism is just simply a bunch of viewpoints about things existing, just like QAnon, just like communism, just like, Scientology. So the Buddha's view is we better start thinking about them. And then we need to check, we need to find out what is in sync with reality and what is not, if you don't want to suffer. I mean, Buddhism is a view of learning how to be happy and not suffer. Buddhism is a set of views about how to stop ignorance and get wisdom. And Buddhism is a series of views about ethics. I mean, fundamentally it's ethics, but they all come to the same thing for the Buddha, And the central player in all of this is the mind, our thoughts. So that's Buddha's expertise. We have to know our thoughts, and then we have to change them if we find that some are not in sync with reality because they cause suffering. But that's the hard part, because we believe the thoughts we have. If you're brought up with a QAnon mummy and daddy and your mind has that tendency, that's your reality for you. You know, right now with the, I mean, we believe whatever thoughts arise, we tend to believe them. And that for the Buddha is our tragedy, you know, if the thoughts are neurotic. And this is why we suffer. And then, of course, if we think that they're sort of coming from the brain, and the brain is this solid piece of flesh, then what can I do? It's not my fault, you know, I'm stuck with it, you know. This is really, so the Buddha's view is we have to know our mind. The central part of being a Buddhist is to know your mind and then to assess those that are neurotic, those that are deluded, those that are misconceptions, which means the ones not in touch with reality, because they are the ones that cause us suffering. I mean, this is a big surprise, you know. It's a shock to us to think that my thoughts are what cause me suffering and my thoughts are what cause me happiness. But it's so clear. And that's why I like to use the examples of people I know in prison. Always this one woman, I mean, many people, my friends in prison, you know, two at least recently, two with long sentences, you know, two men, one a Latino, one a white guy. I don't know the background too much of both of them, but you know, certainly the gangster one, he was in the gangs, like it's normal, you know, he's in Los Angeles, he was in gangs, he's an older man now, been in prison many years, he's applying for parole. I've known him for 20 years, and I mean, from what I know, I'm not clairvoyant, he seems a pretty sincere practitioner. He's got an extraordinary daily practice, detailed, he's an extraordinary meditator. Visualizes the merit field, you know, does hours of practice. Another friend on death row, he does at least 2 hours every single morning. Incredible practice. This other one, the two aren't on death row. The three I'm thinking, but the two aren't on death row. Both applied for parole. So in California these days, they're expanding their wish to get more people out of prison, you know, because the rules there have been so shocking, so awful. And so this one that I know, Henry, who's been really a devoted practitioner, he's written books, he teaches people in prison. And I mean, it's just extraordinary, really an admirable practitioner. So he goes and they don't believe a single word he says, not a single word. And I mean, we know ourselves, if someone doesn't believe just one word you say, we're so devastated. But he's such a solid practitioner. It's just like he's accepted, you know, he's accepted. That's okay. That's okay. I mean, we'd be shattered otherwise. This other man was given come back in 10 years, he was told. He's a practitioner as well. He teaches Dharma as well. Both incredible practitioners. So because they're in prison, which is such a garbage dump, they've learned you either go mad because that's not going to make you happy. Being in prison will not make you happy. No way. But they've realized they can change their mind. So they've changed their mind. So that means they're happy people. I mean, it's such a simple example. This is Buddha's expertise, you know, how to know your mind intimately, to learn to see what's in your mind. And it's so shocking to hear initially. And even if we've been practicing for years, it's still so hard to believe it. Because we are convinced, it's deep in our bones. Ego's view believes, don't blame it, you know, all the external people who teach you these views. It's the way ego works, that we believe happiness and suffering come from out there. We believe it totally. But my friends in prison don't have a choice. So they've proven they can learn to be happy by changing their minds, you know. I mean, you couldn't get a better example. And sometimes I say, you know, with us who aren't in prison, we've got unbelievable freedom. I mean, when I realized the restrictions of being in prison, and some of the prisoners, especially if you're in your cell 23 hours a day, with no freedom to do anything, you know, living with cellmates who you have no choice about, and living in small 8 by 10 foot rooms, some 23 hours a day, enough to make anybody go completely out of their brain. They've realized they can change their mind. But we might as well be in prison when we realize how free we are. Because in the end, there's a saying in Buddhism, you know, in the end, the Buddha says, I don't know, maybe it wasn't Shantideva, I can't remember, but it's a Buddhist somebody. If you can change something, hey, change it, no problems. But what if you can't? This seems so simple. It is beyond profound, but we kick and scream and refuse to hear it, you know. So my friend in prison, sitting in his cell 23 hours a day, does he have the choice to get out? No, he doesn't. He can't even get parole. So forget it. He's looking to the rest of his life. He's already 56 or something. He's going to be probably in prison till the day he dies. Maybe not, maybe yes. Meanwhile, what's he been doing? Changing his mind. So he's got a good practice. He's content. He doesn't get angry. I mean, he doesn't blame because he's got no choice. But look at us. In the end, if you've got a problem, there's only ever two choices. It seems too brutal to talk this way. We've only ever got two choices. If you're in a job you don't like, you can change, you can leave the job. And sometimes it really is difficult. Maybe you really would starve if you left the job. So then if you can't change the job, what else have you got to change? Your attitude towards the job. But we don't think we can do either. That's our hopelessness. We don't even think we can change our mind. And then not only do we think we can't change our mind, forget about changing the job. Oh no, I won't get another job. Oh no, it's not possible. Oh no, I couldn't do that. Oh my God, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd never have any more security. It's not possible. I couldn't do that. Well, then maybe you can change your attitude towards the job. Given that you've decided you can't change the job, given you've decided you're not going to leave the job, then you better start seeing some good things about the job. Like my friends in prison. Nobody on the planet would choose to live in a prison, I promise. If you saw it for free in the real estate pages, you would not choose to live in a prison. So what do? They change their minds. But we don't. We continue to complain about the boss. We continue to complain about whatever it is. Feeling, and not criticizing, it's just the feeling of hopelessness. But you could try and see some good things about the job. No, that's not possible. There are no good things about this job. So what do? We live in misery. This is how we suffer mostly. This is the way we all suffer, feeling imprisoned, literally imprisoned, It's really so shocking. And it's just pointing out how suffering we are. It's not being critical. It points out how much we suffer. And we know how hard it is to change our thoughts. Unbelievably hard to slowly change your view, decide to find something good about it. It seems almost impossible. It seems like reversing the energy of a bomb. But this is the essence of Buddha's practice. That's the essence. If you want to point out one thing in Buddha's practice that makes you a Buddhist, that's it. That's his expertise. That's Buddha's expertise. Coming from what? From his unbelievable, sophisticated, unbelievable, clear view of his own mind, and therefore the minds of all beings. And what Buddhism is methodology of how to change your mind. I always quote this. When you look at the end result of being a Buddhist, it's so simple. A Mahayana Buddhist. Buddha. That's the word, Sangye in Tibetan, Buddha. The etymology tells us exactly what the job is. It's almost so simple, but we get so confused. Buddha implies the eradication of all the delusions. But it's so shocking for us in our culture, isn't it? Psychologically, in our models that talk about the brain, it's so shocking to hear this. When you first hear it, I remember a woman in a course, and it's first of hearing this, she was shocked. She was open-mouthed, was shocked. But don't be absurd. You wouldn't be a normal person if you had no attachment, anger, anxiety, pride, jealousy, depression, fear, you name it. Because we factor those in as normal parts of a normal person. That's our neuroscientific view. That's our psychological views. And I'm not being rude. These are facts. So we assume that these are normal parts of a normal person. So normal that we think you'd be abnormal if we didn't have them. So it's too shocking to even hear it. And that's why we call it, oh, that's religion. You just believe it. It's kind of fantasy, But Buddha's talking about the mind, actual cognitive process. That's his expertise. Not only can we do that, Da implies, this is the Mahayana component, when we're onto the Bodhisattva path, we can develop the rest of the mind, which is, the Buddha would say, is at the core of our being, is indestructibly who we are, love, compassion, and all those. And there's logic to all this when we study. That's why we have to study Buddhist psychology. Most of us don't, We like Buddhism, we love the practices, we become monks and nuns, we say our mantras, we have faith, blah, 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 blah. But we don't actually study the mind. We think we know the mind. Oh yeah, I'm attached. Oh, I'm angry. But the Buddha's view of these, the Buddha's assessment of these, the Buddha's description of them, the Buddha's psychological model is so precise, so clear. And it's not the physical. It's the mental we're discussing, So how can we change it? So if we hear that the end result is get rid of the rubbish and and grow all the goodness, that's what Buddha's found to be true, possible, then that implies the job, doesn't it? It implies the methodology from the very beginning. We better start learning about the mind. And then even more precise, and this is the job we find so hard to do, if I can get rid of one lot of my mind and I can grow the other, it's evident I have to learn to distinguish. That's the key job of being a Buddhist. That's the key job of being a Buddhist. That's the essential job of being a Buddhist. That is the job of being a Buddhist. Everything else is there to support that job. Well, it's about that lovely story as a teacher or something, wasn't it? And some student came up and said, "Oh, I've just done my circumambulations." And he said, "I'm very happy for you, but I hope you practice Dharma." "Oh, all right then. Well, I've just done my prostrations." He said, "That's fine. I'm happy, but I hope you practice Dharma." Like that story like this, you know. Because they're all the practices. If we understand the logic of it all, they're practices that help our mind do the job of actually, quote unquote, using Tibetan and Indian terminology, practice Dharma. Means change our mind. What from? To what? From less deluded to more virtuous. That's it. It's not complicated. That's the job. Everything we do, living in vows, prostrations, having confidence in the Buddha, doing things, going off and doing retreats, that's all tools to help us do the actual job. The actual job. You know, ethics is Buddhism for sure. Buddha's view about karma is incredible, so sophisticated, so amazing. The law of karma, Buddha's presentation of ethics, good behavior, bad behavior. But even that's not uniquely Buddhist. A good communist would behave nicely. Your grandmother will tell you to not kill and not steal and not jump on the wrong partner. But when you become a Buddhist, where you do the unique job that's specific to the Buddha, is when you work on your mind. You become your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe so beautifully puts it. You have to know your mind, if that's the case. And we sort of vaguely think we do. We do, a little bit, we do. But the Buddha's view is we can know it to degrees of subtlety that we don't even have in our modern psychological models, you know, and that's where this concentration meditation comes in. This genius technique invented by these brilliant Indians well before the Buddha, you know. They're the ones who came up with this. And Buddha happily took it with him when he diverged in his own direction. It's a skill to learn how to concentrate. It's so practical. Concentrating, mindfulness, as Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. It's not religious in its nature. It's not virtuous in its nature. It's a brilliant skill, this technique called shamatha, calm abiding. It's this brilliant technique that helps us focus the mind. Well, you think, well, why would I want to focus my mind? Well, so you can start to see what the hell's going on in your mind. It's a tool, that's all. And why is it so hard? Well, that's where the Buddha's explanation comes in. Why is it so hard to know our mind? Well, first of all, because we're addicted to the outside. Since we wake up until we go to sleep, where is our attention put? On the outside. So that's what we're utterly fixated on, the outside. And even our models of the mind and our neuroscience and our views in the world tell us that that's where the real world is. And I'm this sort of occupant of this real world. So I've got to be focus on and get, you know, avoid the ugly bits of the outside world and try and get the nice bits. That's how we live our lives. That's what we think getting happiness means. That's what we think getting suffering, stopping suffering. Buddha says, you know, they play a role for sure, but they're not the main player. And that's again the shock. They're not the main player. Your handsome boyfriend is not the main reason you're happy. The ugly boyfriend is not the main reason you suffer. That ugly, disgusting prison is not the main reason my friends suffer. And the proof is that they can be happy in it, which proves it proves it right there. Right there, it proves the point totally. And this is getting us to emptiness, as Lama Zopa says. You know, if prison, for example, I mean, there's this wonderful book that's coming out soon. Moshe very kindly asked me to put it together. It's for all his letters. The last 20 years, people in, you know, I was working with the Prison Project, and people would write to Rinpoche, request him to become their teacher. And in his own amazingly kind way, he'd write unbelievable letters. I mean, one man got a letter of 45 pages, 45 typed pages. He must have spent weeks. Holly says that Rinpoche at any given time has a folder of at least 2,000 letters from people, you know. And he'll spend as long as it takes for that particular person. And this one letter, unbelievable, the depth, the intensity of the teachings on emptiness, on attachment, unbelievably kind, you know. So he asked me to put it together as a book. It's not just a book of letters, it's been put together in a kind of coherent way. And basically it's completely pure, perfect Lojong teachings. The whole book is that those teachings, the more advanced teachings in Buddhism about how to transform problems into happiness. Learning, like my friends in prison, learning to be happy in these garbage dumps, you know. And that's the main tone of the entire book. It's an incredible book. So it's coming out, and we're doing a website for it, and it's meant to be a fundraiser, you know. And of course it's addressed to prisoners, but it's totally the most perfect advice to every single one of us. And of course Rinpoche repeatedly would tell these prisoners, would repeatedly say, this, you know, the very first prisoner he ever wrote to, who wrote to Rinpoche, was the very first prisoner who ever wrote to us when we started the prison project back in 96, 95. This young man, Arturo, wrote a letter to Rinpoche. And it was the first time Rinpoche said this to our prisoner. And now it's this theme in all his letters, you know. He said, your prison is nothing in comparison with the inner prison of ordinary people. The prison of attachment, the prison of anger, the prison of jealousy, etc. And I mean, my friends in prison know this to be the truth. And that's the nightmare we all live in. We live in the prison of the internal prison. And like I said before, we might as well be in prison if we really we can't change the job. We can't get the husband to be better. It is not our power to do this, but we also feel we can't even change our attitude towards the job and towards the husband, because they are precisely our two options. We have two options, but it sounds so brutal to say that, you know. But that's what my friends in prison know, because they have no choice. They have no choice. We think we have choice, but we end up becoming paralyzed, you know. So these letters, unbelievable, unbelievable advice, unbelievable. And it's totally for everybody. Of course it is. Of course it is. Unbelievable, intense advice. But it's contrary to the way the world thinks. It's sort of shocking, you know. Apparently Milarepa said, you know, this marvelous 11th century yogi or 10th century or something. He said, whatever the world thinks, Dharma's opposite. You know, whatever the world thinks, Dharma's opposite. So if it's our potential, what's happened? Claudia, can you, oh, there you go. It's done, fixed. Okay. So, you know, if we can hear this simple point, it sort of, it clarifies things, because it's the commonest one when we start becoming Tibetan Buddhists. It is so complex. There's such a vast body of knowledge there. I mean, they study it for 20, 30 years in the Tibetan monastic university system. I mean, it's, you know, think, what are they studying for 20, 30 years if you've got to change your mind? Because there's so much to know in order to be able to change our mind. And the way, of course, the lamas would tell us, the way they would frame why it's difficult to change our mind, is they say because we need to purify our minds. And it's not a term we would use in psychology. You've got to purify your mind. It sounds a bit depressing. It sounds like you're naughty. But all it means is Buddha's telling us that we come into this life completely programmed. I mean, completely programmed. It's what we call instinct. It's so interesting. The materialist world says we do come into this life programmed, but where do we track our programming back to? We track it back to mummy and daddy and grandma and grandpa and right back to the monkeys. If you're born as a lion, we track it back through the lions. So we do agree in the West, we come into this life programmed, but we see it as coming from someone else, and we see it as physical. Whereas the Buddha says, no, it's our own programming. It's out, and this is why my feeling, even beginning to hear about the concept of karma, which sometimes is very forbidding for us modern people, it's very powerful experientially. The implication is pretty powerful, because if I really do believe I come from my mother and father and I've been made by them, they made a decision to make me and plonk me on this earth. And they give me, think of this, it's quite, you know, it's quite interesting. They give me anger, and they give me love, and they give me my depression, and they give me, you know, my being good at music or football. So it is no wonder we have a victim mentality. That reinforces it. That reinforces it. Even if I'm not being rude, but if you even have a faith in God, someone else makes you and puts you on this planet, you know. For the Buddha, that's the weirdest idea he's ever heard. He doesn't say it like that, but it's completely wacky. The more you try to practice Buddhism, if you choose to, the more you understand this Buddha's view about the mind and how you can change it, but crucially, how it's your mind, that you, yes, come into this life programmed, but with what? Your own tendencies. It's not a very complicated concept, actually. You come programmed with your tendencies. And I mean, totally programmed to the point of basically instinctive, you know? The things we start to do and think and feel are instinctive programming from countless times of doing it before. It's a bunch of habits, basically. So if I really do believe that my mother's habits and my father's habits, then of course I'm going to feel paralyzed. Of course, especially if they're horrible parents, of course I'm going to feel outraged. How dare these nutty people make me and give me their junk? I mean, it's a very shocking concept. I mean, and for the Buddha, it's a really demented idea, you know. The Buddha's view is, and I think even if you not sure about karma, but just as a hypothesis, it's very tasty. You don't just begin in your mother's womb. You don't track yourself back to your parents, and you don't track yourself back to a creator. There's no view like that. We're not the handiwork of anybody else for the Buddha. It's a very interesting concept, and it's empowering. This is the point. The experiential implication of this is so tasty that if I come into this life pure, if I come into today, if I wake up today, programmed with my yesterday's habits, which is exactly what we do, then I've got to own those habits, don't I? They're mine. So if we come into this life, and we can look pretty quickly. I mean, my mother never had to teach me anger. I was very good at it. My sisters weren't, but I was very good at it. So where's it come from? I can't blame my mum and dad. It's my habit. So straight away, and then when you look at your good habits, apparently I was a little girl, I was always generous. I don't remember. My mother didn't teach me. So that was my habit. So when we can own, this is the key point about karma, the implication of it's so delicious, that it's my mind, it's my jealousy, it's my anger, it's my depression, it's my love, it's my being good at music. That's empowering. Automatically, that starts to counteract the feeling of being a hopeless victim plonked on this earth by somebody else who has no say in who you are. That's how we feel. I mean, it's a very shocking idea, it seems to me. I know it sounds laughable because it's what we all believe is true, that someone else made you. It's very fascinating. That means we have to go back, like looking for needles in haystacks, isn't it? Back into the past to find out what happened. That's why I'm like I am now. Buddha doesn't argue. He doesn't argue. He doesn't argue that the external world plays a role. It's obvious it plays a role. He just says we're missing the main one. It's the secondary causes. They're only secondary. They're catalysts. That's the best way to put it. But this is the view that takes us so much time, because the interesting is the instinct of ego is to feel like a victim. Lama Yeshe would call ego the self-pity me. It sounds very cruel, doesn't it? But when we start to look at the hubris of attachment, this entitlement, this expectation that I only should get the good things, and then the outrage when I dare not to get the good things. I don't deserve that. That's a philosophy. So I'm going right back to my beginning point. These are all viewpoints, but they're so programmed inside us that we just take them as a given. We don't even think they're a viewpoint. And this is how deeply entrenched we are in our views. If I see a certain person who's mean to me, I will never think for 1 second that I've got that my anger is a viewpoint about that person, and that my anger, as Lama Zopa puts it, that I see that person through the lenses of my anger, that my anger makes that person, no, that does not appear to us. We just believe he is angry, he is horrible. Horribleness is coursing in his veins along with his blood, and my anger is justifiable. I mean, that's how we think. It's exactly how we think, isn't it? Buddha argues with this view fundamentally. Of course, it's difficult to change our minds. Oh my goodness. Don't be surprised. That's why we have to be patient and humble with ourselves. So I use always that example of, my friends in prison, such powerful examples, so unbelievably inspiring, I can't tell you. So the other reason it's so hard to change our mind, one is because we're completely addicted to believing that the outside is the main cause, and that what we experience is merely the response over which we have no control. Oh, anger is natural. Of course, if someone's mean to me, of course you'll be angry. We assume it's a natural response, that we have no choice, meaning we have no choice about it, and that the person is horrible. And when we believe, whatever it is, we believe that's how it is. And that's it. We're stuck in it, paralyzed. And that's because we've been doing this for so long. That's how the Buddha puts it. So when he talks about you've got to, purify your mind, in other words, again, the essential job of being a Buddhist, the heart job, the actual job every day, the actual time you do the instruction of being a Buddha, of being a Buddhist, is when you change the mind. So that second you think, I won't be angry, or I'll try not to be angry. That's practice. You can sit there watching your mind every day, watching your breath every day, looking very holy for an hour every day until the cows come home. That is not being a Buddhist. That's just watching that's just being mindful. Thieves need that. That's not practice. It's a technique that you can use to help you change your mind. Wearing the robes and living in vows is a technique to help us change our mind. Going into retreat is a method to help us change our mind. Every single technique that we have in Buddhism is a technique to help us do the actual job of changing our mind. So we've got to get it clear what being a good Buddhist is, you know, changing your mind from being deluded and neurotic to being positive and valid. And for whose benefit? First, your own. Don't ever discount that. Then eventually for others as well. That's it. That's the essence of it. So every second we do that, we're doing the job. But because the views are so entrenched, because our misconceptions, is how Buddha puts it, are so entrenched, we've got to put atomic bombs under them, you know. So that's the heart job. But if we take the Lam Rim, as we know, this packaging of Buddha's teachings, which I like to call, you know, they call it the first scope of teachings, the middle scope, the great scope. And we know the Tibetan terminology. Well, I like to call it junior school, high school, and university. You know, the compassion wing is university, the more advanced. Compassion is more advanced. You've got to do the work on yourself first. So high school is where you work on your mind. That's when you become a Buddhist. So what's junior school? That's change. That's, as Lama Zopa says, controlling the slaves of your mind. And what are they? Your body and speech. That's it. Your body and speech. That's where the ethics all comes in. And that's a stupendous, powerful practice. And this is the backbone of our practice. You know, keep living in vows, living in good ethics is the kind of the infrastructure. Living a life of ethics gives us the ability to then work on our mind. Living in vows for its own sake, I mean, living in good ethics for its own sake, or being a nice person because you think you're expected to be a nice person, that's better than nothing. You don't hurt people, but it's not enough. You've got to understand the logic of ethics. And Buddha's logic is super clear. So when I'm a Christian, this is a really important point to remember these points. We've got to think these points through if we're thinking we want to like Buddhism. Not just like it. Often our trouble is we conflate liking Buddhism with knowing Buddhism. Big mistake. So, you know, ethics, living in good ethics, which Buddha would call abiding by the laws of karma. You know, it gives us initially a little bunch of instructions, not instructions, yeah, but he exhorts us. It gives us suggestions. He's like a doctor. He's not a creator. So he's not the boss. He's not a punisher. He's not a rewarder. So when we hear that Jesus says, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, we know it's because God said not to do it. And then we get nervous and we know we're going to get punished. This is very much our own, this is the view we live with. This is this neurotic view that we live with in our minds. And don't blame your Jewish mummy, your Catholic mummy for that. That comes from ego grasping. That's the dualistic view we all have. So we walk around trying to be good girls because we want to be loved. We don't do it for the right reason, you know. So even if you do it because you don't want to get punished, it's better than nothing, but it's not the real reason. For the Buddha, it's not the real reason. So for the Buddha, the real reason at the first stages to not kill, not steal, not lie, is not because Buddha said. That's like going to your doctor and she says, don't smoke. And you say, why not? Because I say so. You would laugh if you heard that. There's nothing to do with that. But that is the Christian view, and I'm not criticizing. If you do believe in a creator, the creator's the boss. God runs the universe. God made the universe. God made me. God made the laws. Then, of course, the main reason he says not to kill is because he says so. That's the exact answer. I always quote that from my Jesuit priest friend. That's what defines something as a sin in the creator religions. And that's appropriate. But that is not Buddha. But that's mainly what drives us, this feeling that someone said I shouldn't do it. That's why when we hear about karma, we hate it. It sounds like the worst type of punishment and reward, you know. But there's no punisher in Buddhism. There's no rewarder. There's not like that. There's no view like that. The Buddha has found from his own experience that when we do actions with our body, speech, and mind, every one of them just naturally programs my mind with those tendencies and will bring other results as well. But the fundamental one is, we know if you keep practicing piano, you're not surprised that you get better at piano. It's like, duh, you know, it's called habit. Well, that's an essential thing about karma. We come into this life programmed with our habits from having done these things before. So the Buddha's view is then, given that everything I think and do and say programs me into the person I become. So he says, if you do actions that harm others, that are driven by attachment or anger or whatever, That programs you with those tendencies and that will ripen in the future as you having those tendencies, as having those things done to you, etc., etc. This is for Buddha a natural law. So he's like a doctor who lays out the exact problems, the exact consequences of smoking cigarettes. He's laid it all out. He's done all the research, and then you'll go to your doctor, Buddha doctor, and he'll show you the cancerous lungs. This is a result of smoking. So you would never blame the doctor for that. You wouldn't say, how dare you say you're going to give me cancer, and get all guilty. It'd be a revelation. You'd thank your doctor for his incredible kindness. Well, that's the Buddha's view. He has found from his own experience that this is the reality of the universe. This is the law that runs the universe. So we take that as a hypothesis. It's not punishment. It's not reward. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama said one time, karma is self-creation. That's a wonderful way to put it, isn't it? We're the boss, you know. And that's already, I'm saying, even without much real confidence in the view of karma, but taking it as your view, it already lessens self-pity, because it's, you know, you start to take responsibility for your good stuff as well, for all your good habits. You're so delighted every day. You must have practiced virtue and kindness and not lying and not stealing. How incredible, how marvelous. You own it. You own it. You don't feel a victim of things. You own it. This is the powerful point I've found. When I first heard these teachings from Lama Zopa Lama Yeshe, that was the word that blew my mind. The idea of karma really was the one I felt I'd missed all my life, you know. So before we start working on our mind, we've got to start controlling the slaves of our mind, the body and speech. That's the first level of practice. As Lama Zopa says, from this instant, the first practice, this second, is you refrain from doing actions with your body and speech that harm others. Now, why, you should say to Buddha, to Jesus, you say why, and he will tell you because God said. And that's good enough if you have faith in God. For why? For the Buddha, because petal, sweetie pie, Robina, those are actions that harm others. But the key point is, because they're driven in your mind by anger or attachment, they're going to harm you. So that's the one I think we miss in our culture. We miss this completely. We think, oh, that sounds selfish. I shouldn't think about myself. But that's the point. If we miss this, we miss the whole path of renunciation. We have to learn to be revolted by suffering. We have to be fed up with the thought of future suffering. That's why you'll eventually go on a diet. That's why you eventually will give up cigarettes. That's why eventually you'll give up sugar, because you're sick of the thought of future suffering. You have to have that. That's the first stages of practice. If we miss that and kind of leap into the compassion wing, we'll go with, you know, it's a bird with one wing. You will not work. It will not work. You've got to know your own suffering first, and you've got to know the causes of your suffering, and you've got to want to be sick of suffering. That's what Buddha means by renunciation. You're giving up, renouncing suffering and its causes. So you've got to be so intimately familiar with your own body, own speech, and own mind. That's the first stages of practice. First level, entry level, instant, first level, entry level, junior school, grade 1, right now, stop doing actions with our body and speech. At least stop doing the heaviest ones, which are those that harm others. So you don't kill, don't take the ungiven, as Lama Zopa says. You don't say words that aren't true. You don't rabbit on about nothing. You don't jump on the wrong partner. Simple 7 little actions of body and speech. But the reason Buddha exhorts us not to do these, and it's our decision because he's just a doctor, he's advising, is because they're going to harm me. That's the one we miss. We miss that. That's the fundamental basis of good ethics in Buddhism. Starts with that. As you get more advanced, of course, compassion will be your main basis. But you've got to start with compassion for yourself. The Lamas don't put it that way, but that's a perfect term that we understand. You've got to be sick of that suffering for yourself. That's the motivation for starting practice. And then you become this reasonable, balanced person, this stable person who has control over your body and speech. How incredible. I mean, we might have been practicing for 40 years. We still can't control our speech. We still vomit out what we feel. So it shows how hard that level of practice is. Forget about changing the mind. We can't even change our behavior, you know. So intense. So the obstacles to changing our mind is because our behavior runs the show. And why does our behavior run the show? Because we've been doing it since the beginning of this time, Buddha says. And then we believe everything else out there is the cause of my suffering and the cause of my happiness. Sometimes we've got all these wrong views in our mind, Buddha says. We've got a bunch of ridiculous viewpoints that are not in sync with reality. And we keep following them. So we keep deepening our suffering. So we have to start controlling our body and speech first. That then gives us the energy, the space. And even before that, the very first level of practice, at least stop sowing more negative seeds. Stop creating future suffering. First, but the next one, and this is all still part of the first scope of practice in junior school, you then do purification practices. You put atomic bombs under the seeds you've already planted that haven't yet ripened as suffering. And as Lama Zopa says, we are insane not to do that, not to do purification every single day. At the end of the day, you finish with the 4 opponent powers, you know. I think we discussed that one time. So the very first level of practice, don't say those crummy words. Don't jump on that. Don't stamp on that ant. Don't take the thing that's not given to you. Don't cheat on your partner. Simple things, things that the world knows, you know, but there are different reasons according to who you are of why you should or shouldn't do these, you know. For the Buddha, it's got nothing to do with punishment. It's got nothing to do with reward. There's no concept like that in Buddhism because there's no punisher and there's no rewarder. So it has to be for our own sake. There's no other logic. You're not trying to please God or your mother. You're trying to do this. You've got to refrain from those actions because you don't want future suffering. My mother used to say, she was a Catholic, she used to say, virtue has its own rewards. That's karma, you know. So when we understand this, we'd be so grown up. We'd be so grown up. We would be accountable. And it has nothing to do with whether it's seen to do something. But we're so addicted to that one. We're so, you know, this is when we learn in the more advanced stages, we learn about these 8 worldly dharmas, and we hear about these different levels of attachment in our mind. And the most primordial attachment, the one that's the hardest one to see, far more than for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, is attachment to being seen as a good girl, to be seen to do the right thing. So we can behave very nicely, but it's because we want to be seen to be good. And we have that, and then we live this kind of secret life of our weird mind because we think I can think what I like as long as no one sees me. I can do what I like as long as I can get away with it. That's demented, you know. That's how we think. That's our dualistic view of morality. But the Buddha's view is when you really understand that whatever you think and do and say produces the person you become, it's got nothing to do with being seen. It's got nothing to do with being seen, you know. But we really believe, this is how demented we are. We really believe I'm allowed, we say, I'm allowed to think. We say, I'm allowed to think what I like. What is the meaning of that? Think about that. That's like saying, I'm allowed to throw any seeds into the garden that I like. You are allowed to. But seeds bring fruits, baby. Seeds bring fruits. So you better know what damn seeds they are. If you don't want weeds in your garden, you better check the seeds. That's the Buddha's view. Of course, you're allowed to. No one's bossing you around. So therefore, when we understand karma, that's when we start to grow up. But who wants suffering? Who wants suffering? Why would I eat sugar? I don't want suffering. I don't want to have cancer. It doesn't matter whether my doctor sees me smoke or not. Cigarettes will cause cancer. So then out of self-respect, you will make a decision to give up that activity. That's exactly the Buddha's view about the mind and about karma, actions of body, speech, and mind. Exactly the same. It's self-respect. Karma is self-respect. It's unbelievable. And that's junior school. And if you have a good practice and you live in vows and you control your body, speech, and mind to some degree, your body and speech, and then you go to high school and begin to work on your mind, you've got, you know, you live in your vows, you do some purification every day, you've got a perfect practice. Guarantee. Because karma, as Lama Yeshe says, karma takes care. And this is the point that's shocking to us because we just think it's a superstitious view made up by somebody, you know. But karma is a natural law. Buddha's observed it. It's a natural law. No one runs it. It's a natural law. So if it's a natural law, that means it's coherent and consistent. We know that about laws. We're geniuses at that in our world. We know about laws. Once you learn the law, you can, you know, if you know the law of botany, you can guarantee in 20 years' time, your garden will turn out to be exactly as you did, exactly as you projected, because you know the law of botany and you sowed the right seeds. Of course, other laws can come along like storms and destroy it. That's different. But the law itself is consistent and coherent and logical. And we have faith in these laws, totally. When you know mathematics and engineering and architecture, and you design a 100-story building, you're not surprised that if in 5 years, 10 years' time, you get a 100-story building. Oh, it's not like magic. You know the laws, so you follow the laws and you'll get the building. It's hardly rocket science. But that's how Buddha talks about the mind. But that's not how we think in our world. We think it's all random. We think everything's good luck. It's all bad luck. Happiness comes, suffering comes. No one knows why. We say we're so unbelievably ignorant, you know. But it's in our hands, Buddha says. We can do it. So look, 45 minutes is gone. I've just raved on for 45 minutes. Any questions? I've just talked about the essence of the Buddhist approach, okay? Any questions, please? I want you to ask me some questions now. Please forgive me. Talking too much. Goes very quick, doesn't it? Suddenly it's 1:45. Gone like a dream.
Chuck W has a question.
Who does?
Chuck.
Chuck, where are you, Chuck? Talk to me. Where's Chuck? Sweetie Pie, where's Chuck?
There we go. I'm unmuted. Sorry.
Oh, there you go. Hi, Chuck. Talk to me.
Venerable Robina, thank you for taking my question. I
Good.
had written this out this week, and you touched on it today, so it's amazing.
Okay.
You talked in Ludo about what role karma plays in the family you're born into. But my question is, what significance does it play in whether you have children at all? And if so, does the family you're born into, does their karmic debt affect one's offspring? So really, it's like a sins of the father question.
No, I understand that. Yes. No, that's a particularly interesting view, I think, among Chinese people, I think I've heard about who have the view of karma. No. You see, if we take the view, Chuck, that, you know, okay. No, it's a bit more nuanced than that. Okay. In my case, let's say, for example, I get born to my mummy and my mummy's good at music. So then she sees her little Bobsy and she sees that I've got the tendency to be good at music too. So we tend to feel I got the music from mummy. So technically, no, my mother came into this life because she had practiced music before. So she was good at music. And I came into this life because I'd practiced music before. And so I was good at music. But we conveniently also, due to our karmic connection, my history with my mother from past lives, I fell into her lap as her daughter. So it was most convenient for me because she taught me music. So it was very convenient. So I own my music and she owns her music. Now, let's say she had certain genetic tendency to get cancer. That's definitely true. I would get that cancer. I've got those same genetic tendencies. We get the physical from our parents. But the point is this, the main cause of why my mother's got that tendency to get cancer is due to her past killing. And the main cause I've got that tendency by getting it from her is because I also got past killing. So the mind is still the thing that drives everything. So therefore, you can track back that cancer for many generations. So in that sense, you could say you can see the physical thing, but I create the cause due to my past killing to get born into that particular family. So I'm still the main cause of it. So you don't, so anything, so karma is not coming through the physical. You experience results, but it's all coming down from the mind. The mind is the cause of, including what physical house we belong to, that house of my mother's, that is because karma ripens in 4 ways. One is the type of life we get, a human in our case. 2 is our tendencies, our personality traits, and they do not come from my mother or father. You don't track those back to your mother or father, but the 3rd way karma ripens is called experiences similar to the cause, which is how they treat you and see you. But the 4th one is environmental karma, and that's the physical one. So the result of killing is I would be born with a tendency to kill. The experience similar to the cause result of my killing is I would get killed or die young. But the 3rd result, environmental result, would be that I've got an allergy to peanuts. I would get cancer. I would get sick. That's the physical component, but it's my actions in the past of killing that caused me to be born into that environment. So the family can share it, but I'm the main cause every time. And you certainly, any karma you have, any results that you have from your life are not from your parents, are not from the grandparents. You can have the cancer, which is the tracking back to the parents, but every time, whatever it is you experience, you track it back to actions that you have done. Karma is super personal. Does that help, Chuck? Is it coherent?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that was a great explanation. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
Perfect. Okay, good. Thank you, Chuck. I mean, it's really tricky, but it's quite, these explanations, they're quite intense in the text, but they go into great detail. And I think it's like, it's good enough to, it's not enough just to say we like karma. We have to know the nuts and bolts of it a little bit to really help us navigate it. Otherwise, it's very confusing. So it's just really, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Who else, Charmaine?
I don't have any other questions in the chat box. Oh, yep, I just got one. This one is, let's see. This one is from one of the students says, as I understand it, Zen Buddhism doesn't believe in reincarnation. How does this relate to karma?
I see. That's interesting. Is a person there that like to talk to me? Never mind. I'll answer what I know. I don't think that's true. The Buddhists, I know I taught at the San Francisco Zen Center, for example, and we talked about emptiness. We talked about the Buddhist texts. So the Mahayana, the Zen, the Japanese Buddhists study all the Buddhist texts. And of course, those teachings are there, but I think you possibly would say they don't talk about it much. They've got a whole approach that is very much in the moment, you know? So I think it's not that they don't believe in it because they all study the same Buddhist texts, but they just don't emphasize it. I'd say that answer. If that helps. From what I've done, from the discussions I've had with Zen Buddhists. What else?
Thank you.
In the chat.
Oh, good. It's a pleasure. Okay, anybody else? Put your hands up if you want to speak to me. Very happy to have a question. Any old question, any old discussion.
John has a question.
I have a question.
Who is I?
Christopher Harris.
Oh, well, Christopher, good on you. Talk to me.
So my first marriage was pretty dysfunctional and I was an active participant in it.
Yeah.
And had many children. And I have a very, what's the word? Well, we're not really speaking at the moment.
I understand. I understand. We all understand, Christopher.
And I know I have a karmic debt. I mean, I have a lot of new realizations about my role as a father and a husband back then.
Yeah.
But I was wondering how I really truly understand that I have a karmic debt that I need to work on with my children, and because I'm not in great communication with them.
Oh, not with the children either. Not just with the previous wife. You mean you're not in communication with your children?
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't want to ask you the details in public. That's not the point. But it's sort of like this, you know. We can see, you know, isn't it? We have these different kinds of relationship with different people. We keep bumping into all kinds of people. We bump into somebody, you know, and you must have fallen in love at some point, and then suddenly all these dramas happen, and then the karma ripens, and it's collective karma. That's the thing. When we understand karma, we can be so much more forgiving of each other in families. I mean, if we've got the view, which we tend to have instinctively, ego, that someone's always the blame, and it's the parents who are the blame. And I mean, look at the suffering of so many parents when their children have utterly rejected them, or equally fathers reject their children. But it's this, when we have a view of karma, we see it's like this incredible collective karmic thing. All this intense history you must have with a woman, and then the intense history you must have with these beings who, when you hopped into bed with your wife, unless you use Petri dishes, you know, this is normal, then these consciousnesses came running like magnets to your egg and sperm. I mean, that's the most intense, unbelievably powerful karmic connection. Karmic connection means you got history with each other from the past. So of course, in your family, that history from your own shit and from your own goodness is now manifesting, is ripening. So when you know it's this collective one, then as you say, we've got to own our piece of it. Each one of us has to own our piece of it. Of course, the ego wants to blame everybody else. So we all run around pointing fingers and we all go mad. So that each of us has to own our own. And one of the powerful teachings about karma is that we create the cause to have that child who can't stand us. We create the cause to have that father who beats us. Whereas we feel naturally in our world, the materialist world, where there's innocent victims, and how outrageous it is that a father should do this or a mother should do that. And we really think it's random. And then we think that you literally make the child. I mean, Buddha argues fundamentally with those viewpoints. You know, so when you have the feeling that you've got this strong karmic connection, strong history, and then as everything that arises in front of you, as Lama Zopa puts it, is your karmic appearance, suddenly you're all beloved and wonderful, and suddenly the next day you can't believe it, you all hate each other. We don't even know why half the time, because some past stuff of the shitty things are now coming and manifesting in front of us. So the view of karma is so powerful if we can really take it on board. to help us own it, to help us know, oh my God, look at the result. And then you learn from it. It's like if you've got a garden and suddenly one day all these horrible weeds start growing, you've got to learn botany to explain why. And when you learn botany, you don't just go on obsess about this is so bad, look at all these bad weeds, but now you know how to change it. You know why it's happening, and then you can own it, and then you can do your piece to change it. You can only change your piece also, but that can be very effective for others. I mean, is that kind of talk? Is that a helpful talk? What I'm saying?
Yes, and that's what I'm doing is I'm owning my piece. I'm working on my own karma. I feel like I need to be doing something else to.
Okay, you mean so what you're saying is you want it all to be nice again. You'd love it to be nice and all forgiving, and you all see each other again. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, that would be nice, but I'm
that
not.
Would be, but that's that you'd like that, wouldn't you, Chris? Naturally, we'd all like the good outcome, but that's where you've got to use wisdom. So, I don't know what the history is. There's no point in talking about it. But let's say there's one child who doesn't want to talk to you. Let's say they're angry with you, let's say. All you can do is clean up your part and then, and then be wise. You can't force yourself onto that person. All you can do is do your part of it. But the point is this, if we really understand karma well, because it's such an interdependent relationship, then by you changing, that can have an effect on that person. They mightn't even realize it, but you changing your view, you owning your part, you wanting it to be good, you're not being resentful, you're having love and forgiveness. You can't say anything to the child because I don't want to speak to you, but don't be surprised it'll change one day. There's not much time to talk about it. We maybe will another time, but when we do purification. So for example, let's say let's just say your child doesn't believe you. It doesn't matter what it is, but let's say this, who cares what it is, your child or your boss at work. Let's say a person's convinced you're lying. Okay, so that's due to your lying in the past, such that you now have the karma called experience similar to the cause, which is a person doesn't believe you. So we keep thinking, if only they would believe me, and if only I'll try and prove to them I'm telling the truth. That's not enough. It's due to your past lying. So when you do the purification practice, and the first step is regret. So you regret from the depths of your heart, whatever you must have done, that lying in the past, which is now ripening as that person not believing you. And then you regret that. That purifies that result. So suddenly don't be surprised one day that person who accuses you of whatever you think that you've done, but you regretting the past actions you've done that are why they don't like you now, that are why they don't believe you now, that are why, whatever it is. So by you regretting your past actions, not this life, 42 lives ago, it could have been something you've done, then if you regret that, that purifies that result. So don't be surprised it will just start to change. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's more than just, like one of my friends in prison recently, how I mentioned, who was turned down for parole. The board of directors, the parole board didn't believe a word he said. They just said he was lying, he's not a practitioner, and he's just using them, So it must be devastating not to be believed. And I said to him, well, don't forget purification. If you regret from the depths of your heart whatever lies you've told to those persons, because karma is super personal, deeply regret whatever you did in the past, that purifies the result, which is them not believing you. So that can help shift it. And then also you use your wisdom, and you can make effort to reach out, and you don't, it could have an effect, but you've got to have the wisdom to know what to do when. But the key job is work on your own self, and then learning to, do you understand? There's many things. There's more time, there's not much time to talk about it, but all this is practical. And I think we should just devote one of our days just to the whole purification practice, because it's so tasty, so powerful, actually.
Yes, thank you so much.
And just keep being, and the thing is though, sometimes, Christopher, the karma is so strong that person might never change their view. So, and often what happens is this is a very powerful point. Let's say you've done nothing wrong to this person who doesn't like you, whatever it is. Let's say you've really done nothing wrong in this life, but they believe you have. So naturally, if they keep believing you have, and no matter what you do, they won't change your mind, they won't change their mind. We tend to judge our own self by that result, but that's got nothing to do with you. Sometimes that's just their mind, and no matter what you do, you'll never change them. That does not mean you've been a failure. You see what I'm trying to say? We think success is if the person changes, then we feel everything's lovely. It'll be lovely to have it lovely, but each person's got to do their own trip. Each person's got to clean up their piece of it.
Yes.
And all you can do is do your bit, and
Thank you.
and have a good heart, and be content with what you're doing yourself. and understand karma from it and learn from it. It's a learning. It's like when you see the weeds, you know why they're there, but now you know how to learn about the future. That's the key point. Do you understand, Christopher?
I do understand. Thank you.
Good. Well done. Good. Okay, you people, look, an hour's gone like a dream. So I hope there's anything that's useful. And useful means, what's the action from it? Not just, oh, I like that idea, but how do I put it into action? That's the thing. So there's 1% of what we've heard today that's useful, that you can put into action. Wow, go for it. Wonderful. All right, you dearest people, all of you. So happy to see all your faces. There's Doris in Nova Scotia. There's Mary up the road. There's Renee. I don't know where Renee is. There's Steve. Hello, Petal. Annie, Tatiana, darling Judith. All you kind people. So good to see. So happy to see you. Thank you, darlings, so much. Jangchub, Semtrog, Rinpoche, Makye, Panam, Kyeguchi, Kepanyampa, Mepayang, Gong Ne Gondu, Havasho. That means may this amazing attitude of wanting to benefit others grow and grow in the hearts of all. Never give up, especially us crazy Americans right now. I'm an American too. There's unbelievable conspiracy theories now, people going out there and Mr. Trump not leaving the White House and all these people believing totally there's this big conspiracy. I mean, when we understand conspiracy theories, that's really serious mental illness. And that's how it's so rampant in our country now, isn't it? It's unbelievable. It's terrifying, you know. I mean, 70 million people adore Mr. Trump. That means that they believe his words. It's very fascinating. I'm not saying he's a horrible person. I'm not saying that. But just the differences. We believe in these. I mean, it's just terrible. Conspiracy theories are the worst thing in the universe. And Buddha, in a sense, is saying that's how our minds are crazy. We believe everything we want. Unbelievable. But to find out what reality is, then we have sanity. Hello, Catherine in North Carolina. All right, darling, I better go.
I just wanted to let you know that Fernando from Mexico has been translating your teaching tonight. He was working
Oh my
hard.
God, if Fernando's busy, he's translating the Russian teachings, he's translating his full-on job now. Oh my God. Well done, Fernando. Okay, honeys. Much love,
Thank
everybody.
you.